As a filmmaker, you want to have a versatile tool, a tool that can have all the features in one package. I'd like to introduce you to my favorite run and gun micro four thirds camera, the GH6.
Once you cross this world and into that unconscious state, you will vividly be present in everything you see. Closer and closer you go. Are we dreaming?
My name is Krashnik and I'm a content creator and filmmaker based in New Zealand. I took the GH6 around New Zealand, South Island, and filmed at many amazing locations. I took a heli to the mountains, went to rivers, lakes, and some awesome cool secret locations, and even the iconic clay cliffs. The GH6 is a very portable camera with very compact lenses, which is perfect for travel. My LUMIX journey has begun in 2014 when I purchased the LUMIX GH4, and I was really impressed by all the features, and I became a LUMIX fan ever since. A few years later, I entered a short film competition with the GH4. Our film won the first place, and I was thrilled to receive the LUMIX GH5 as the prize. The GH5 took my filmmaking journey to another level with so many more possibilities and features. I definitely pushed the GH cameras to their limits over the years and put them in very extreme conditions. I filmed the Holly Festival, which was filled with water and color powder. I filmed many music videos and even took the LUMIX GH5 to film underwater. LUMIX has yet again stepped up their game and released the LUMIX GH6. It's a really impressive and feature-packed system which makes filming a lot of fun. My favorite feature of the LUMIX GH6 is IBIS, the in-body image stabilization. It can stabilize any lens, vintage lenses, and even anamorphics. Stabilizing anamorphic lenses is really impressive, and it's something you don't really see on the market. Shooting anamorphic on the GH6 is a dream. IBIS has a special mode that will allow you to choose the specific squeeze factor of your lens to stabilize it correctly. This is a fantastic feature for run and gun filmmakers that want to achieve a cinematic look and not get any micro jitters in their footage. Some of the LUMIX lenses support dual IS, which means both the lens and the sensor stabilization work together to achieve more stable footage. This works really well on the kit lens, the 12-60, as it has up to 7.5 stops of stabilization, which is super impressive. Filming in challenging conditions like helicopters or boats will be a lot more easier and smoother. So we are just out here, flew out in a helicopter. I was using the dual IS stabilization on the GH6 together with the kit lens 12-60, and it's really good because dual stabilization means you have more stable shots, especially if you shoot 50 frames or even 120. And now we're out here in the mountains getting some amazing shots of the views of New Zealand. So I'm currently using the 12-60 LUMIX lens, which has a switch for power OIS. So this kit lens can actually work together with the in-body image stabilization and get really nice and smooth results. And this kind of environment, it's really bright. So having the viewfinder on the GH6 is actually pretty handy. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to see the focus on even like the Atomos monitor. So having a viewfinder is really helpful for getting focus in such a remote location. IBIS also has a few other features like E-stabilization, which will stabilize your shots a little bit more, and also Boost IS, which will actually make your handheld shot look like a tripod shot. So I'm currently on the 50-200mm, which is equivalent of a 100-400mm lens. I'm gonna go all the way to 200 and get a shot of the mountain, turn the stabilization completely off so you can see the dramatic shaking of me trying to hold the camera as steady as possible versus the actual stabilization with Boost IS and how smooth that actually is. As you can see, it's really shaky, but I am trying to hold this lens as steady as possible. And now I'm going to switch on power OIS with Boost image stabilization in 3, 2, 1, and the image just becomes super steady. And you can make it even smoother if you film in 50 frames or even 100 frames, then the shot will be really super smooth. So I'm just gonna try to get a very crazy shot. Hold it with one hand, 200mm, try to get a shot of the airport, and rolling it. That's crazy. It's so smooth, look at it. Another feature I'm super excited about is the ability to choose from a wide variety of frame rates and resolutions. The GH6 can shoot in 5.7K at 50 frames, as well as 4K at 120 frames and 300 frames in 1080p. All these resolutions and formats support 10-bit color, which is really important when grading Vlog. Overall, the GH6 has amazing color no matter what format you shoot in. The GH6 has a few resolutions that will allow you to capture the entire 4:3 sensor. And this is great for anamorphic lenses because anamorphic lenses will stretch out your image and then you have to squeeze it down in post. Shooting on a 2x anamorphic lens and 16:9 aspect ratio will give you a very long stretched out image, which probably will need to be cropped in post. Shooting on a 4:3 aspect ratio will allow you to get a taller anamorphic image to work with in post. Today we're at the awesome Clay Cliffs, a very cool, very cinematic looking location. We're using the anamorphic lenses today on the GH6. We've got a 4 kit, so we are utilizing them and getting some cool and cinematic shots. So this is the anamorphic lens setup we have over here. We have 100mm, 75, 50, and a 40. So I'm mostly using the 40mm just because the space is giant, so we want the widest focal length. It's still pretty tight, but it's manageable in this space. It looks really great, especially on the GH6. You can see and preview the anamorphic footage straight on the monitor. These lenses are 2x squeeze. They give you this wide aspect ratio, which is very cinematic and perfect for a spot like this. So these lenses are a PL mount, which is the cinema glass mount. So what I'm doing is using a PL mount to micro four thirds adapter, and that's how I adapt it to the GH6. So you can use cinema glass on a LUMIX GH6, makes a really portable cinema rig. There are also other options on the market, for example the Laowa 1.5x nanomorphs. Those lenses are very portable and tiny and still give you the anamorphic feel. I shot a lot of amazing anamorphic footage at the Clay Cliffs, but I also really wanted to get some epic wide-angle shots of the Clay Cliffs, so I used my go-to wide-angle prime lens, the 9mm f1.7, and I got some fantastic landscape shots, and it really showed off the scale of the location. The 9mm lens is really tiny and bright at f1.7, so it's a perfect travel companion. One challenge that every filmmaker is facing at the moment is delivering different aspect ratios for different social media platforms. If you don't have anamorphic lenses, the anamorphic 4:3 open gate mode is still really useful, and that's because you get a lot more out of the image and it's a lot easier to crop vertical and horizontal images out of it. Because the GH6 has so many resolutions, the camera actually has a My Menu option, which will allow you to choose your favorite resolutions. You can also record ProRes and ProRes HQ, but those file formats do take a lot of space, and that's where the SSD recording comes into play. SSD recording is a feature that Lumix has enabled through a firmware update, and it's one that I've been waiting for. There are 3 main benefits of recording onto an SSD drive. First of all, bigger storage for lower cost, which is a massive benefit when you want to record a lot of footage, and it's cheaper to use SSDs than CF Express cards. The second one is speed. SSD drives will support the highest recording resolutions, frame rates, and bit rates on the LUMIX GH6. And third one is the ease of use. You can literally just unplug the SSD drive from the camera and plug it straight into your computer to edit. And because it's a USB-C drive, it supports really fast copying of files, which is great when you're on a go and you want to get your editing done as soon as possible. The only thing that you'll need to make the SSD recording work is the latest firmware and also a little mount for the SSD drive. Recording in 5.7K 300 megabits at 50 frames and 10 bits on a 1TB SSD will give you over 7 hours of recording time. 4K ProRes HQ at 25 frames per second 422 at 811 megabits per second will give you 2 hours and 40 minutes on a 1TB drive. So if you want to record ProRes, it's really worth to invest in few of the 2TB SSD drives, otherwise CF Express cards will be a lot more pricey. If you would like to use an SSD with your GH6, make sure to check out the LUMIX supported drive list. And when you're not using the SSD drive, the USB port can also be used for powering the camera. Another new feature is the dynamic range boost, which can capture up to 13 stops. It's great for capturing a natural look, where you can get more details in the shadows and in the highlights. It works up to 5.7K in 50 frames per second and 5.8K anamorphic in 25 frames. Dynamic range boost mode captures 2 frames, one with a higher ISO and one with a lower ISO, and later combines those 2 frames into a final high dynamic range frame. This feature will give you less clipped highlights, which is fantastic when filming in challenging light conditions. It also brings the dynamic range of the Micro Four Thirds sensor closer to a full frame size sensor, which is pretty impressive. It's really awesome to be able to use so many of the GH6 features like anamorphic mode, high frame rate, dynamic range boost, and stabilization all together. And lastly, I cannot forget to mention the customization of the LUMIX GH6. There are so many things you can do, customizing the buttons to turn on certain settings. It's just great to use a camera that is so easy to work with. You simply press and hold the button that you want to customize and choose the setting that you want to control with it. For my GH6, I usually customize the exposure compensation button to turn on and off my zebras, the back button to turn on the peaking for manual focus, and then the front button to turn on the boost IS or image stabilization depending on the project. And I use the second button on the front to turn on my grid lines. I usually change my front dial setting and program it to control my ISO. The buttons around the dial allow me to turn on a few assistive settings like waveform, level gauge, frame marker, as well as give me quick access to anamorphic D-squeeze menu. You can also program different settings in the custom mode. For me, the video mode is my main 4K 25 shooting mode. When I switch to custom 1, it's 4K 50 frames. C2 changes all the settings into 100 frames per second for slow motion, and C3 is the open gate anamorphic mode, which I can use either to film both vertical and horizontal content or use it with anamorphic lenses. After 8 years of using the GH cameras, it's fantastic to see all the improvements and attention to detail that Panasonic has put into this camera. It's also great that Panasonic listens to the users and also implements features that filmmakers have been asking for. I hope you enjoyed this video and the visuals that we were able to capture around New Zealand on the LUMIX GH6.
Panasonic.